Hey, welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. We are continuing our look in Module 6 at the topic of planning. And now here in this video, we're looking at the topic of SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is a basic tool of analysis. We've mentioned it in the previous video on strategy. It is an important strategic tool, and so we continue to teach about this well-known method and tool and concept for analyzing for the sake of planning and strategy. Let's climb right into it. After this video, we believe that you should be able to use SWOT analysis as a standard tool to examine the internal and external environment and factors to inform your planning and strategy work. So, what is SWOT analysis? Well, SWOT is spelt with an O. That's the first thing. And so you should recognize SWOT is an acronym. It is in fact an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And when you look at this little diagram I've got on the screen for you, what we're talking about is, first of all, everything we do in strategy starts with the mission statement of the organization. We've talked about that a couple of videos ago. But flowing directly from the mission statement, the statement of an organization's fundamental purpose, we then perform 4 sets of analysis in order to formulate strategies that support the mission. What are these 4 forms of analysis? First of all, we look inside the company and we perform 2 steps of analysis. One is to identify what are our internal strengths. What do we do better than our other competition? Where are we strong? Where are we so strong perhaps that we have actual distinctive competencies that we can leverage in the marketplace? That's our first set of analysis. What do we do well? The second part of analysis, we still remain looking at our internal structure, our internal company, our internal history, in order to identify where we have weaknesses, where we are not so strong. In fact, where we might do particular things not as well as other competitors in the marketplace. We have to be honest and objective, but we have to analyze, well, who are we really? Not only in terms of strengths, but also weaknesses. Now, once we've performed those 2 steps of analysis, you can see as you look at this diagram, the next 2 are looking outside the company at the external environment. And what are we trying to identify? Possible opportunities in the marketplace, in the external environment that may have the potential to deliver higher than normal economic benefit to us if we're able to properly exploit those opportunities. And similarly, to examine the external environment to identify possible or potential threats in the external environment that may threaten our profitability. And this may be the kinds of things like the tendencies of competitors or changes in the regulatory framework of the environment or social cultural changes and all the kinds of things we've talked about previously as we look at the external environment. Now, after you have thoroughly gone through these 4 steps of analysis, you will have a good picture of who you are and where you stand in your marketplace. And the goal of SWOT analysis is not simply to glory in your analysis. You can see there that flows down to the last box, which is to inform and formulate good strategy. Now, knowing or having a better sense where you're strong, where you're weak, and where the marketplace and the environment provides potential opportunities and potential threats, what strategies can you formulate that will support the mission of the company and exploit opportunities and your strengths while also neutralizing threats and avoiding exploitation of your weaknesses? That's the goal of SWOT analysis, to provide a reasonable, sound, objective, honest, and transparent analysis of you and you in your environment. So, as you can see here, organizational strengths, skills or capabilities that you have that you do really well. And so we divide strengths, when we talk about SWOT analysis, into common strengths and distinctive competencies. A common strength, as you see defined there, is a skill or a capability that, well, quite frankly, you're not the only one who does that well. In fact, probably a lot of firms in this marketplace do that same thing or things well. And you can see there where common strengths lead. Common strengths lead to competitive parity. Competitive parity, in other words, when large numbers of competing firms, well, they can implement the same similar strategy because they all have the same kinds of strengths. And therefore, if it's a common strength, it's certainly not distinctive. In fact, it very quickly gets to the point that most consumers expect any firm in that industry to be able to do that certain set of things well. So really what we're looking for is not necessarily common strengths. Those are wonderful. Those allow you to compete with others. But what we're trying to identify is, you can see there, distinctive competences. A distinctive competence that is perhaps only held or possessed by a very small number of firms, perhaps only your firm. Is there some distinctive competence you possess that you can therefore, as you can see there in the next bullet point, exploit as a competitive advantage? If you can provide a better quality product than anyone else, that's a distinctive competence. If you can provide a better tasting steak dinner than anyone else in the neighborhood, that's a distinctive competence. If you can fix a broken piece of plumbing faster and more efficiently and less expensive than anyone else, that's a distinctive competence. All of those kinds of things that you do uniquely better than other firms that you compete with in the marketplace. Now, the real question becomes, if you do it better, can others imitate you? Because if you're doing something better, chances are you'll catch the attention of your competitors and they'll want to see, can we also duplicate that? Strategic imitation, therefore, is duplicating another's competence into a valuable strategy. And the goal here is to achieve not simply short-term copycat strategic imitation, but you're seeking sustained competitive advantage, which basically exists after all attempts by others at strategic imitation have ceased. What do you still protect and defend and able to do better than anyone else? That's really what differentiates you from your competition over the long haul, and that's what we're seeking, sustained competitive advantage. Now, that's a discussion of organizational strengths. But when we talk about organizational weaknesses, you can see here, we define organizational weaknesses, skills or capabilities that right now, let's be honest, you just don't have them. And you cannot enable and therefore are limited in what you can choose and implement strategies to support your mission. There are some things perhaps that you'd like to do, but you just can't do them because you don't have the skills and capabilities to do it well. In fact, if we're honest, perhaps there are other competitors who do that very thing very competently and very well and better than us. So the question is, if you can identify honestly where you're weak, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to invest money, time, resources in order to obtain those strengths, to get better at those skills and capabilities where you're currently weak? Or are you instead going to modify your mission, modify how you go about doing business because, quite frankly, you just can't shore up that particular weakness? And therefore, a competitive disadvantage exists when a firm is not implementing valuable strategies implemented in competing firms because they simply can't shore up where they're weak. So the question really becomes, when you identify organizational weaknesses, what are the short-term versus the long-term costs of that weakness remaining? You may look at that weakness and say, man, it's going to take too much money, time, and resources to make us stronger over there. Therefore, we'll just kind of work around it. But then the question is, in avoiding the short-term cost that's necessary to start getting stronger there, what are you giving up in the long term? And maybe it makes sense for you to bite the bullet and invest now, despite the fact it's costly, because by investing now and shoring those weaknesses up and making them strengths, you buy yourself such an advantage over the long term that the short-term investment is worth it. So from here, once you've identified where you're strong and how that affects your strategy, and where you're weak and how that impacts your strategy, the next two steps, evaluating opportunities and threats, this requires you analyzing the external environment. So, what are external opportunities? They are areas in the environment that, if exploited, may generate higher performance. It could be a new market opportunity. It could be changing tastes and therefore an opportunity for a new product. It may be competitors' dissatisfaction with one of your competitors and therefore the opportunity to take back some market share. It could be any of those kinds of things. Whereas external threats, as you see here, areas in the environment that may increase the difficulty of an organization's achieving high performance. Whether that's the changing landscape of the regulatory environment imposed by federal or state government, whether it's a change in consumer tastes that make your product no longer as attractive in the broad marketplace. Could be those kinds of things. And so as you look again at this diagram, perhaps you get a better idea after this short discussion what it means to do SWOT analysis, what it means to consider, first of all, the organization's mission, and then, first of all, analyze as a company internally, where are you strong? Are any of these strengths distinctive competencies that will sustain attempts to imitate them and copy them by others? And where are you weak? And therefore, how are you going to respond to internal weaknesses? As well as, in the external environment, are there present or potential opportunities for you to earn higher than normal economic profit? Are there looming threats that you'll have to avoid? And of course, the idea here is, as you see, after you perform the analysis, to formulate good strategy that supports the organization's mission by exploiting opportunities and threats and strengths and neutralizing threats and avoiding weaknesses. So this then, we hope, has been, in this short little discussion on SWOT, at least gives you an introduction to using SWOT analysis as a standard tool to examine your internal and external environment and the factors that inform your planning and strategy. Hope that's helpful. More on this in the textbook, of course, and we'll have more discussion on that next time we see each other. We'll see you in the next lecture.